Hello and welcome to D&D 101. We have previously talked about classes and character races, or as I like to call them, species. In this session, we're going to talk about the backgrounds. This is the third and final component for creating your character. And this is essentially what history your character has had, which determines which proficiencies they will have on the various skills from the character sheet where we have the skills table. There's a wide array of backgrounds. A huge bunch are already in the player's handbook for creating your character, but other source books such as the Sword Coast Adventure or Dragon Heist, which is actually one of the playable campaigns, have their own additional backgrounds. Now, as a general rule, if a background has been printed in any book, you can use that background. It is also possible to come up with your own backgrounds, but you need to be used in the rules as laid out in the book. Your page number for backgrounds is 125 in the player's handbook. But essentially what you will get in the book is a brief description of what the background is, proposals of personality traits, ideals, bonds, and flaws. As we mentioned, looking at the character sheet, these are things that just basically roughly describe what your character will do. Now, you don't have to use what are there on the tables to roll against. You can completely come up with your own versions that fit within inside that concept. The backgrounds that are available to you are Acolyte, Charlatan, Criminal, Folk Hero, Entertainer, Guild Artisan, Hermit, Noble, Sage, Sailor, Urchin, Soldier, and Outlander. Now, each of these happen to give a different concept of the background, but name-wise, typically they all make a little bit of sense. We'll go into a little bit more detail on what each of those are. So, for example, the Acolyte is somebody who is, well, simply an acolyte of a god. They are a holy person within inside a communion who's been worshipping that god. This can be a variety of different classes still, but typically an acolyte would fit most best with a paladin or a cleric. Your charlatans and your criminals, most of you probably have already guessed, but this would fit best with rogue. Otherwise, there are, of course, other characters that could have these. Like charlatan can fit for. It could be a fighter who lost their way and fell into that kind of background. Entertainer is probably one of my favorite of the backgrounds. I've used this as my sorcerer, so I play in one of my campaigns. I play an entertainer sorcerer, whose background simply is he was raised in a circus after being found on the streets by some travelers, and he uses the magic that is innate to him to entertain the populace. So instead of using his magic for attack, he uses it for fun and entertainment, which results in, when it gets into combat, most of his spells were status and illusionary magic. So he was using that to aid the team. For example, when I mentioned earlier about using fog clouds to keep our team under cover while combating the opposition. A folk hero is quite an interesting background, because the idea here is you're going to become the hero. So instead of it being like you're already a hero of stories, it's the beginning part of the story. So for example, Robin Hood, at the beginning of the story, Robin Hood isn't your hero yet, but he's already in the whispers becoming a legend. That's kind of the idea of the folk hero background. Your guild artisan is simply just somebody that works with inside a guild. Guilds can be of any collection of skilled labor. So chefs have a guild, builders, merchants, these all have their various guilds. I've seen this mostly be used with somebody playing a dwarf builder who is part of like a stonemasonry guild. and therefore has contacts with inside that world where to go to go and get the information they need about a certain building or object that they might have once worked with. Hermits. I don't think I really need to explain a hermit, but simply it's somebody who's taken themselves away from society to live among nature. So obviously your druids, your rangers fit very well in this, although you can still have that working with other things. You could be a rogue who is a hermit who just sneaks into town occasionally just to steal and pilfer. Your noble, of course, is therefore part of a family of nobles. This fits very well for any of like the city-based campaigns, for example, Dragon Heist. If you're a noble and you're in Dragon Heist, you're going to be able to get yourself into higher places, meet with lords, and get information that might be a lot harder to come by in the darker, dirtier streets where you'd want to be part of the criminal organizations. However, out in the wilderness, this can still be useful because it means that you might have papers or documentation that will get you benefits from a small farm that you come across, or a traveler with a cart who will then give you free passage because you're a noble. But you have to be wary because some people in the greater world of Dungeons and Dragons look down at nobles, and it could potentially not help you if you're a noble. Outlander, much like a hermit, these are people who are out by themselves traveling. However, the Outlander hasn't denied society and civilization. They are out venturing the greater world, being one with nature, but also enjoying the comforts of towns and civilization. So they will come in from time to time. Aragorn from Lord of the Rings is very much an Outlander and fits very well for that. Your sage is your researcher, your person of study, so your librarians essentially in this case. Most wizards end up being a sage background. It just fits for them because they spend all their time researching, but any kind of bookwormy character could fit here. For example, I've got this great one playing in one of my campaigns at the moment where they're a sage barbarian, where they've spent all their time reading about fighting, but they've never gone and fought, and they decided it's time to actually experience it because you can't have knowledge by just reading a book. And so here they are, never fighting before in their life, trying to put to work the stuff that they've read about. I think that was a brilliant part. They've obviously got inspiration for doing that, and I really enjoyed it. A sailor is, as it says on the tin, you're just out sailing, you know how to work a ship. The benefit of having a sailor, if you're playing, for example, there is one of the hardcovers is called Ghost of the Saltmarsh. It's all based out and about in a sea town, and you're going out sailing quite a lot. The sailor's background is great here because this is somebody that will have advantage on checks for running and sailing the ships, so they can be quite useful. Another aspect actually for sailor, while we're talking about it, is in the docks of any town, they're likely to know connections and be able to get information a lot easier than somebody who doesn't have those connections due to their backgrounds. Your soldiers, typically the soldier background is either that you're a mercenary or that you're a member of, say, the City Watch in Waterdeep, or of another town, or you might be a soldier for a king, for some kingdom. The benefits here is when you're talking to other military groups, depending on your rank, you can gain obviously benefits there, respect and help. It tends to come with benefits from an intimidation point of view because people will see you as somebody that is obviously quite a lot scarier, who demands respect through just their stature. It can be interesting to see how that can be developed. I've seen people use the soldier background as a fighter, of course, it's quite a natural one that fits with fighter, and apply it as that they were part of a group of soldiers. Their squadron was completely defeated and they're currently trying to find their way back home. I've seen it with another group. They're an ex member of the Watch, but have gone since on their own to be a hired mercenary, due to not quite agreeing with the rules and regulations there. And the final one in the player's handbook is the urchin. Now, back in Victorian period, obviously urchins were everywhere. Urchins have basically been a thing that we don't really see that much. However, in D&D, because it is based in the past, you've kind of got a mix from the Dark Ages up to Victorian period. Urchins exist. So essentially, these are your living on the street, orphan children, and they have skills with stealing, so sleight of hand becomes quite a key skill. This can also fit very well with the rogue class. So yeah, that is essentially it with backgrounds. As I said, you gain out of the backgrounds, it tells you what equipment that you'll have as a starting character. It tells you what skill proficiencies that you have, potentially some tool proficiencies, like proficiencies with the thieves tools. I didn't quite talk about proficiencies in previous pieces, but essentially all this means is each level that you are as a character, you go into what we call a tier. So levels 1 to 4 are tier 1, 5 to 10 are tier 2, 11 to 15 tier 3, 15 to 20 are tier 4. Each of those tiers have a specific proficiency bonus that you will get if you are proficient on the task. And on the character sheet, that proficiency is typically already added to your modifier to work it out. So if you're proficient in something, let's say sleight of hand, which is a dexterity, let's say you have a +2 to your dexterity and you're level 10 character, so you're tier 2, so you'll be +4 to things that you're proficient on. So you've got your +2 dex with your +4, which is +6, which means on a dice roll for a sleight of hand, you will add a 6 to that d20 roll that you've made. So it's pretty straightforward. So yeah, that is backgrounds. If you want more detail, character examples, that kind of stuff, let us know in the comments below, and we'll consider that for another D&D 101 episode. But for now, thank you all for watching, and keep it geeky.